It's like a big part of Systemology is we get the business owner to start off by focusing what is the primary product or service, what is the core target audience that we're looking to serve, and what is the minimum viable set of steps required to attract that dream client into the business, sell them, onboard them, deliver the core product or service, and get them to come back.
David, thank you so much for joining the show, man. So happy to have you here.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us, AJ. Looking forward to it.
For sure. So I am so excited for this episode and to chat today about systems and how you've removed yourself from both of your companies and how you're helping other entrepreneurs do the same. Honestly, all weekend I was thinking about this and looking forward to it. You know, how often on a weekend Saturday, especially for me, I'm sitting in beautiful tropical Vietnam and I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to talk about SOPs on Monday with David. But
Love it.
Yeah, it's such a, I guess, one of those seemingly boring topics that a lot of people probably avoid. But it's so important. So I'm so glad we could connect and chat about it today for the viewers.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's the building blocks of great business, and a lot of visionaries, business owners, they don't really see themselves as systems people. They don't necessarily connect with it. And that's one of the things that ends up holding them back, because they think, oh, because I'm not a systems person, I can't run a systems-driven business. And it's really quite common for business owners not to be systems people. And it's about learning how important they are, finding the right team members, a lot of probably what we're going to cover today. So I'm just as excited as you are. I love talking about this stuff and helping to open the eyes of the business owner and go, oh, maybe this is possible. Maybe I could do this in my business. That's hopefully what we end up today.
Yeah, definitely. Well, just from reading your book, it's already transformed the way I look at my business. I mean, I read Built to Sell prior and Traction, and this was just like the perfect next thing I needed to read. But before we dive in, you want to just say a bit about who you are and what you do for anyone who doesn't know?
Yeah, so I've been a business owner, entrepreneur from the day I left school. Tried many different things, everything from the stock market education space through to owning a rock and roll clothing music store. The business I'm probably most well known for is a digital agency called Melbourne SEO Services. And I was in that business for a little over 10 years working in the day-to-day operations. And it was a bit funny because I already had an inkling of how important systems and processes were. But for some reason in that digital agency, I just had a blind spot and I thought, oh, this business is different. I can't systemize this business. And that was a big part of what kept me trapped in that business. And what ended up happening was I ended up finding out we were pregnant, and I said, oh, I don't want to be that guy who's always too busy, that dad who never has time for the kids. And I just said, I'm going to learn how to remove myself and systemize the business, which I did with the digital agency. And then that ended up being really a catalyst for a lot of the work that we do with Systemology, because I realized this is a huge problem, very common, that most business owners don't end up solving. And I was able to do it multiple times and moved into consulting in the space, and then really perfected our method to help business owners start to get off the tools. So that's how I got started. And now I've been bitten by the systems bug, and Systemology is my main thing. There's probably a big, and I don't want to do too much of a spoiler for the end of the Systemology, but right at the end of the book, it ended up being, in addition, my digital agency, which I had a lady, Melissa, who was the operations manager. She ran that business. She found out she had to move back to the US for some family reasons and had to resign. And when she resigned, I was kind of faced with that decision. What am I going to do with this digital agency, which I hadn't been working in? And I said, oh, look, maybe the time is right to sell it. So I ended up selling the business, and that's what's given me the space to go all in on Systemology.
Yeah, and in the original state, you wouldn't have been able to sell it, or probably not nearly sell it for as much as you did, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think a lot of digital agency owners, they know that really deep down. Even if they're running really successful agencies, a lot of their agencies just depend on them. Yeah. They are the rainmaker. They're doing the sales. They're doing the marketing. They're overseeing the client fulfillment.
Everything.
And when they're not there, the business grinds to a halt. And that is really means there's not a huge amount to sell in the business. You've more got a job, and it's very hard to sell a job to a potential acquirer. So a big part of this is making sure that the agency works without the business owner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said in the book about how even if you don't, I believe this as well, even if you don't plan to sell your business, you should still build it to be sellable, because that just means you have a better, easier to run business.
Yeah. And it's also there are opportunities that will fall in your lap, and some will be great opportunities. Some could be a disaster, and you don't know what's going to happen around the corner. And having a systemized business that doesn't have key person dependency increases your optionality. You've got more choices on things that you could do. If Melissa had come back and she'd resigned and I didn't have a systemized business, I wouldn't have been able to sell. I would have been pulled back into the business, would have had to have run it, or I would have had to have sort of close it and run it into the ground. And
right.
So it was by systemizing the business, whether or not you sell it or not, you've just got more options. And that's a big part of what it's about. Sometimes I've made my shift in my brain now. I really build every business that I work on now with the intention of selling. So that way I'm building it the correct way, because again, you never know what is going to happen around the corner.
Yeah, definitely. And that was one of my favorite parts of the book, was how it all started because you and your wife got pregnant.
Yes, that was the first step. I said, step one in Systemology, get pregnant.
Yeah.
So, it's that you need some, or you don't need it, but it's very helpful to have some form of leverage, because a lot of the business owners, you build up habits and you get used to doing things a certain way, and those habits then become challenging to break. And by using the, hey, we're pregnant, I felt like, oh, that's going to really force me to do what I need to do here. And whether it's that or something else, I think the business owner needs to get leverage. When we run little workshops these days, and if someone isn't pregnant, what I try and first get them to do is think about how much it is costing them to not systemize. Not only the cost to the business, relationships, everything that goes on with your family, money, growth potential. Like there's a lot of cost for not doing it, let alone all of the potential opportunities you might be missing out on. Because when you're so focused in on your business and it's all consuming, the opportunity of a lifetime might be knocking on your door, and you just might not have the opportunity to take advantage of it. So yes, step one really is about getting leverage on yourself and figuring out how and why is this going to be different. Because I mean, you said it, you read the books, you've read the Built to Sell and Work the System and the E-Myth and Traction. I mean, they all talk about this idea of systems, and we all know they're important, but you've tried it in the past, it didn't quite work, or you haven't tried it, or you're not really a systems person. Like a lot of people have this stuff floating around, and what I want to have with Systemology is go, this time it's different. How are we going to approach this most important activity and get it right this time?
Yeah, well, I like the opportunity cost framing, because like what I'm hearing you say is you need some motivation, because it's not easy. It can be simple, and with the book and with your methodology, it's simpler, but there still is work and commitment involved to make it happen, and it doesn't pay off right away like a shiny marketing trick or a new software. It doesn't give us that instant gratification. So it's
almost like this compounding effect that happens over time, and all of the resistance to changing a culture in a business happens up front. So within that first 6 to 12 months, if you're going to have team members pushing back and not following the process and not migrating to this new systems driven approach, that's when all the resistance happens. A lot of business owners, they don't see themselves as systems people, so they abandon the endeavor at that first sign of resistance. But all of the rewards of systemizing come once you make it through that resistance. And that's why it's so challenging for a lot of the business owners.
Yeah, definitely. Like most things, I mean, most of the things in life that do good for us are the things that aren't going to pay off right away. Like it pays to eat that Snickers bar right then, or that burger at 2 a.m., which is my weakness. Always before I go to sleep, I get that craving. But being, I mean, anything, right? Like even learning, studying, mastering a skill, it's going to take a while before you really start to see that pay off. eating healthy, all of the big important changes. They're always the things that we have resistance to, or they just think it has a lot to do with that instant gratification, like we talked about, you know?
And I feel like when it comes to business, systems and the mastery of systems, it's the master skill. Like it is what holds everything together. It's the foundational thinking that embeds itself into the culture and is cross-department. It's really about thinking, how do the departments work together, and what is a way of thinking and an approach that can be applied to your business globally. So that's why it's such a fundamental thing for me to master. And the more that I work with business, the more that I realize mastering this really ends up becoming a superpower.
Yeah, I could see that. I think just from consuming some of your content so far, reading the book, it seems like the way you explain it, it's like really the core of a great business. The business is the systems. And I think there's a quote like a business really is people. It's a group of people, which I also agree with, but it's systems and then the people, right? So it's like really because if you had a group of very talented people, it's not enough to have a scalable, sustainable business. You need the glue to hold it together.
Yes. Michael Gerber, author of the E-Myth, said a quote that always sticks with me, that systems drive the business and people drive the systems. So it's like the business is actually the systems, and understanding how they all work and what tasks need to be done and what is the process to produce the consistent outcome. That is the business. And then the people are the ones that end up driving those systems. So it's really important to distill down what the essence of the business is, and also focus. Like a big part of Systemology is we get the business owner to start off by focusing, what is the primary product or service? What is the core target audience that we're looking to serve? And what is the minimum viable set of steps required to attract that dream client into the business, sell them, onboard them, deliver the core product or service, and get them to come back? And yes, there are hundreds of things you could be systemizing in an agency or in a business, but let's start with how the business makes money, because you can fix just about every problem in business can be fixed with cash flow and money. Yeah. So if we focus on how do we get the business able to deliver that without key person dependency, we go a long way to solving a lot of the other problems.
Yeah, definitely. And I think so. Basically, I think a lot of people, like you said earlier, a lot of people watching this, they might already know they need systems, right? No one working 80 hours a week thinks that that's how to, I think some people still think it has to be that way, but most people know they need systems. But what I really like about your book is it's just a very practical, simple guide. And for me, I've had a lot of resistance to building systems. I'm a very extroverted, creative person. So I feel like that's the type of person that often is like, for me, it's like, oh, I don't need systems, or not that I don't need it. It's just like much more resistance comes up for me sitting down to focus on something that detail oriented, you know, but go ahead.
I wanted to speak to that one because that one was actually part of what gave me the biggest insight into what we ended up doing with the digital agency. So we had a sub brand, which was Melbourne Video Production, and we delivered video services. And I'm not a videographer, so I don't know how to shoot. I don't know how to edit. And the first shoot that I went on when we set that up, I went out with the videographer and we spent the entire drive. It was about 45 minutes from the studio to the client's location. And I chatted with the videographer and he's going, oh, did I pack that second battery? Oh, I hope I got the extension cable. Did I get the second lens? Oh, I hope we emailed the client to remind them not to wear checkered shirts because they look really bad on the camera because of the way that the lens works. All this stuff that just should have been handled. And straight after the back of that shoot, we developed a shoot like packing checklist. And we just got him every time he would go on a shoot to run through that and make sure that he had everything that he needed, and we crossed all the T's and dotted the I's. Probably about 6 months later, I went on another shoot with him and the experience was worlds apart. We ended up talking about, like on the drive there, we were talking about the shot list, and he was talking about the emotion that he wanted to get across and what he needed to get the actors to do and how he was going to frame certain shots. And we spent the whole time talking about the creative side of things, which is really what needed the space, as opposed to it getting sucked up in all of the administrative stuff. And that's what made me realize, even for creative people, the systems, when executed correctly, and even you can get to the point where you surround yourself with the people that handle all of the creative stuff. So AJ only has to focus on what he can do best, which is all of that creative stuff. And then the team around you does all the admin. Sorry, I might have got the words mixed up there. But the idea of you have all of the admin taken care of so that you operate in only your unique genius. And that's where you're adding the most value.
Yeah, definitely. So basically, I mean, one of the myths you talk about in the book is people thinking, hey, systems aren't for me because I'm creative. I don't work in that very structured way. But what I'm hearing you say is actually structure allows for more creativity. And I would definitely agree with that, because on the personal side, last year, I hired a life coach to help me with my time management. Like we created very strict routines for how I work, and I was so resistant to it. But then I was like, well, by actually structuring how I get into creative flow, I could just get way more done in the week. But I think that example you gave is spot on, because you and the video team, the first time on that drive, you spent all the time talking about admin stuff that a system should have handled. Whereas the second time you could spend more time working on the creative direction. And I'm at a place in my business where I realize like the creative space is where I function best. I'm definitely like high level idea guy. So I'm now just trying to build systems to kind of create more of that time for me.
Yeah. And I think like a few things happen just as you're starting this that can help to accelerate that. Getting really good at recording everything that you do, which you do, it sounds like already pretty well. So recording all of your Zooms, doing Looms, recording whenever you're doing things, recording it, and then thinking about how you catalog and organize that. So you don't necessarily need to be the one that creates the systems, but if that's where all the IP and the ideas are coming from, you just need to take it, think about how that's cataloged. Oftentimes a good structure I always think about is into the different departments. So sales, marketing, HR, finance, operations. Maybe you have a handful of subfolders underneath that, and you start to then organize. And really, it's just you recording yourself doing tasks and sticking the name on so it's easily findable. And then the next thing that you want to do is identify someone in your team who becomes like your systems champion. And you teach them how to watch those videos, pull out the key steps, and create version 1 of the documentation. So that's like a great little place to start. Combine that with some of the things we talked about with systemology around, limiting your focus and starting off on the critical client flow, which we can talk a little bit more about. But that's, well and truly on the right path if you get a few of those key things into place and develop your way for developing systems. It's almost like systemizing the systems creation. That is probably a great place for you to start.
Yeah. And that's what I take from your book is it's the system for creating systems. Kind of like we alluded to earlier, most people watching this know they need systems. They know they need SOPs, processes, automation, but how do I start? It's daunting. It's confusing. When I Google SOP template, I get this very scary looking long thing, right? And it's like, how do I even go about creating that? But I think for anyone watching, whether you're at 10K a month, 150K a month, whether you have systems or not, I highly recommend you go through Dave's book, go through the full thing, because that's what I did. And now I'm going back to actually go through the exercises, actually following your system. But I think, I think like
something I'll touch in on one thing there you mentioned, because I feel like McDonald's is to blame when I think of a lot of the programming that people have around what a system should look like. And they look to McDonald's, which is a really old established company that is taking 15-year-old kids off the street to teach them how to make hamburgers. And they need to go down to this super micro detail and explain every single step. And they've been doing this for 60 years. So they've got every micro aspect of their business systemized. And then the business owner comes along and thinks, I should systemize. I should systemize like McDonald's. McDonald's is a great example and poster child for business systemization. And then they compare where they are to where McDonald's is right now. And then they try and start creating systems like that. And it's so far apart. A system could, version 1 needs to be a simple checklist, a Loom video, like complicate this. How can someone simplify it as much as possible? And a big part of the work that I'm doing at the moment with a lot of our clients is thinking, how do we just change the picture in someone's head around what a system is? because a system might actually be a lot simpler than you think it is.
Yeah, honestly, that's for me, one of the biggest takeaways from the book is that it's way simpler than it needs to be. Because yeah, like you said, I think that's the problem in general with like just that's the tough thing about learning business is we might hear something that's true from a book or a story like McDonald's or a business we admire or a YouTube video, but we always have to consider like the differences in our industry, the size of our business, our model, all of those things. So while that might work for McDonald's, it might not work for a small consulting business or an agency. But overall, I think how your work has helped me is it just helped me simplify the process, because last night I sat down and I did the first exercise you recommend, which is the critical client flow. And for anyone watching, you guys can get this on Dave's website, but I did the critical client flow, and it was 15 minutes that felt like the most valuable 15 minutes I've spent in the last like few months.
Yes. Yeah.
But basically, yeah, I want to touch on that. Basically, so your book is a very practical guide for how to actually apply this. And one of the first things you say to do is to create a critical client flow. So it's basically, instead of creating all these detailed systems, first you start with where you are. So instead of documenting things that you'd like to do, which for me was tough because I have all these upcoming things in our marketing plan. And I was like, wait, I can't put these in the system. First, I got to just document it as is, which I find is really valuable because it separates me. I have like 1,000 ideas swirling in my head constantly. My wife finds it. That's the one way that my wife finds it hard to work with me is because she's like, stop, go back to the first idea. But for me, it separated like all the things that we're getting ready or that we're working on. And it just showed me like my business in its current state. But I think the critical client flow is an exercise everyone should do because like you said, you just pick one product, one target market, and just one actual flow. So I'd love for you to talk about that for a minute.
The biggest question anyone has when they think about systemizing a business, and it's the most common question that comes up for me when I'm working with people, it's where do I start? So again, we talked about it earlier. Everybody is sold on the idea of systems. We want to do it. Great. Okay. Well, what are the first systems that we should start? And I developed this idea of the critical client flow, which just maps the journey that both the client or the prospect, then the client and the business go through to deliver a core product or service. So you take, you start off by thinking, who's the dream client? So who is the person that you would like hundreds and hundreds more of those clients? They're a pleasure to deal with. They refer friends and family. They purchase everything that you've got. They pay your advertised prices. Like, think of that person. Then you think, what is the first product or service that I would sell to that person when they come into my world? What is the very first gateway product or service and where you would get started? Then with that as kind of like your way of focusing, we then map this journey that we go through or the client goes through from firstly capturing their attention. And AJ mentioned a couple of the rules. The rules are only capture what you're currently doing, not what you would like to be doing. And if things are patchy or you don't have something in place, that's okay as well. That's just gives you an indicator on maybe work that needs to be done. So you start off thinking, how do you grab that target audience's attention? Once you've got that inquiry or an inquiry comes in from that person interested in your products and services, what happens? Then what does your sales process look like? Do you have a pre-qualification call or you jump into a Zoom meeting where you walk through what they need and then you go away and create a proposal? So, and basically this is an A4 bit of paper that you work through. The boxes are not more than, you can probably only fit 2 or 3 words in each box by design, so you don't put too much detail in and it's very high level. And we go from grabbing their attention, handling the inquiry, the sales process, the onboarding, like how do you set a project up, collecting questionnaires or entering them into a project management platform. Then there's the delivery of the product or service, the doing of the work, which again, it's only one box. So it has to be very high level. And then finally the handover and then getting them to come back. You map that out on this A4 bit of paper. And it gives you a great starting point, because if you can make the delivery of that product or service happen without key person dependency, you now have something that's scalable, something that can work beyond the business owner. First, we try and get the business owner out of that equation. But beyond that, though, we really want to make sure that it's not dependent on any team member. That's where we get the best scale. And the question to go, once you've mapped this out and you know you've done it right, if you can take your critical client flow and you sit down with, either a team member or even someone who doesn't really know the business, and you walk through the critical client flow, and they should be able to understand and follow along. And even though they might not know your business in great detail, they can kind of go, yeah, I get it. That's kind of when you know you've got to that point, you go, my critical client flow is where it needs to be. And then the last point I'll mention is then you can even go a step further to go, where am I going to work on this critical client flow? Sometimes people just go from top to bottom, but another way to do it is think about where the pain is. So if you did it the other night, AJ, and you looked at your critical client flow, we might say, hey, if we got 100 more clients, what breaks down first? You might go, well, I don't know how to get 100 more clients. Okay, well, maybe it's a marketing thing. Or you might go, the onboarding or the delivery of the core product or service. You're like, if we've got 100 more clients, I'm doing all the work. There's no way that we'd be able to scale that. So you figure out where the pain is, or maybe the business owner doesn't like selling, or they're not very good with their marketing. Like, you figure out where the pain is, and then going in on that part of the critical client flow is another great way to kind of narrow that focus.
Yeah, well, I think the key is narrowing focus, because you're right. When it comes to building systems, there's so many things you can do. So starting off with the stuff that actually makes your business money, because we have ideas, then we have the things that make us money right now in our business,
Yes.
But I think actually I'll share my screen real quick and just show the viewers and you my critical client flow.
Perfect.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this on audio, there'll be links somewhere down below. We'll attach this resource. But here's for everyone watching what Dave's explaining. It's literally this simple of an exercise.
Perfect.
And yeah, this is for my business, Revenue Boost. So we have 4 places we get traffic, and yeah, just pretty much down through the whole client journey.
Let's play a little game. Can you imagine that I don't know anything about your business? Because I don't. So that'll be easy. And let's give you maybe like not more than 5 minutes. Talk through from top to the bottom, and you just explain your critical client flow for me.
Sure. So we get traffic from a few different places. It's usually Facebook group. Should say part of the thing that was hard for me was we have more than 4 traffic sources, but I just picked the biggest 4. But we have Facebook organic, Facebook paid, LinkedIn referral. That's how people get to know us. And then we don't have a call booking funnel. We reach out to every person that follows us or joins our group, and we have an appointment center that books the call. Then we have sales call. For here, I was getting a little stuck on how many should I put the whole sales process, but no, it has to stay high level. So that's what I liked about this process, was it's very constrained. But anyway, so we have traffic coming in organically, some paid. Appointment setter reaches out to people that join our group. So we have a whole workflow for when someone joins our group, we do this. And then it takes 1 or 2 calls to qualify and see if we're going to work with that person. Then we have a verbal agreement. After the verbal agreement, they move on to onboarding, which is they get invoiced. After they get invoiced, they get an agreement. Onboarding onto our coaching program, which involves getting on our Slack community, getting on our course, getting on our weekly calls. So yeah, we do coaching, consulting, and education for B2B sales and marketing. After they get onboarded, then they are now in delivery phase, which is basically 3.5 months of coaching. And after 3.5 months of coaching, we'll have a graduation call to see if we're either going to offboard them, or we'll maybe see if they want to join some of our higher ticket or longer term coaching opportunities.
Perfect. I think what I loved about this, I didn't know anything about Revenue Boost, and I was able to follow it. And I bet anybody who was watching this was also able to follow it. So a couple of things you mentioned, and it was good. You already kind of leaned towards it. Oh, we've got multiple different ways that you generate traffic. Doing it exactly like you did, pick the top 4 biggest ones, I think is a great place to start. Sometimes what ends up happening, and it's in later stages of the systemology process, like someone might say, Facebook is one of those particular methods. But like you see here, there's 2 versions, the Facebook group and then the Facebook page. Later on, we have a thing we call the systems assigned sheet. And that's really where you get down to the tic tacs. So for example, Facebook group, later on, if you think each one of these boxes is going to end up evolving into a system. So we might need to then narrow down and go, great, what is the, if we 80-20 the Facebook group, what is the one thing that needs to happen? And you might go, it's posting once every second day a piece of content. Okay, well, that's the piece of what we make the system around. The whole exercise really is an 80-20 exercise. Yeah. So I suppose the next question for you is looking at this, where if you got loads more traffic, 100x what you're currently getting. What do you think would break first, or where is the most pain for you when you're like, oh, I'm doing these phone calls, or is it the agreement or onboarding, or where's the biggest pain?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So actually, funny enough, the guy who connected us, Josh Aguiar, he asked me like 2 months ago. So I'll provide a little bit more context. We started Revenue Boost only 6 months ago. So it's a fairly baby business, but I feel we're fairly mature for where we are, because we have 8 people on our team now, and we've grown a lot in the last 2 months. But 2 months ago, oh man, I was in so much pain. I was doing the appointment setting, I was doing the sales calls, I was doing the delivery, I was doing everything, which is how it is when we start out, right? But then Josh said, hey, well, if you got twice as many clients, what would happen? And I'd be like, I don't want that right now. But what I did was I successfully removed myself out of sales. So we hired a full-time setter, a full-time closer. That's allowed us to keep the traffic going. Our newest hire was an executive assistant who handles onboarding. So we've mostly smoothed up the middle of it. Now we're at a point where sales and marketing isn't hard for us. I mean, we teach B2B sales and marketing, prospecting, cold email, all that. So we have no problem getting we're about to start paid ads. So it's just a matter of turning the faucet on. So for us, it's kind of like, you've probably seen this too in your own business. There's a point where you can see like what it takes to grow it. And you're like, oh, that's just more ads, just more of this, So super solid about the top half of this, our sales team, our marketing, but where onboarding's been a little bit messy, but I feel like that's not too hard of a fix. I think the biggest thing is the delivery, the coaching. So we have leverage in our model because we have a lot of group coaching, and I hired 3 other coaches. So it's not just me as the face of the business. We have 3 other coaches. So if I had 100 times more clients, I feel like I would just need more coaches, but also someone managing the whole delivery thing.
Yeah. So I think that's good. And you're right. Once you kind of break it down and you get an understanding of what it takes to grow a business, you can kind of see 2 or 3 moves ahead. I mean, that's what a visionary founder is great at doing. So I think if you go, sales and marketing is okay, and then I can see how we can move into paid ads, which means, lead flow is not a problem. We've got appointment setters. We've already mapped our sales process, which I know converts, which is we've been able to make it happen without AJ. Then you're right. Then the next piece comes into onboarding and then delivery. So you probably tackle onboarding first, just because you kind of get them into the program. And then under delivery, that's all about reducing churn and making sure once they get to the end of the 3 months, or however that first little bit of coaching looks like, what the bridge looks like to then move into longer term coaching. So with a lot of business, we think about the minimum viable set of systems.
Yes.
Then once you get that in place, we kind of try and then take what you've got here and translate that into a dashboard. So that way you start to monitor some metrics underneath each one of these. And then it becomes a matter of, as you start, dialing it up. So you'll start to dial up your marketing, and then you just listen to the business. And, over time you might get department heads who look after each of the different departments, and you're keeping an eye and listening to the numbers and the issues that are popping up. And then you use that to guide where your attention goes.
Sure.
And then after you dial this, that's when you start to, like, later stages of Systemology. Beyond that, then you might start to think about, my next constraint is actually staff. Because if you've got all of your core systems down for the delivery, maybe the next part is going to be how we're recruiting and onboarding staff, training them up to be as profitable and productive in the shortest possible time. And that then becomes maybe another area you start to focus on.
Yeah, definitely. No, I love that. I love that roadmap. I think, like you said, kind of listening to the business to see where the problems are, because we already noticed there were some issues with onboarding in that whole beginning part. And we started to work on that. But I think, we haven't had anyone go through graduation yet. So we've just launched this offer like a month and a half ago. So now we have someone, the first person that's about to finish, they asked us first, they're like, hey guys, what's next? Like, do you have more? So I think it's a good sign. But now we're trying to figure out what does that transition look like? But I think just from talking to you about this, part of the challenge for me, well, actually first, here's the systems assigned sheet. So this is the sheet where you say, okay, I know the core systems. Now, who does what in what department. As I did this exercise, I was like, oh crap, I'm the department head for like 5 out of 6 of these. At least I pulled myself out of finance. I think my wife manages that, and she just needs me to not touch it and not spend too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for me right now, I'm basically the leader of most departments. So I'm trying to figure out what I can get out of. Surprisingly, it's actually going to be sales, which is funny because we're a sales training company, but I think it's going to make sense for me to focus more on marketing and HR. But yeah, that's kind of
that proves that you're able to bottle what it is that you're selling, and then you become the best example of what you're selling, which is always a great principle to have. So if you're able to make that work without you, that makes it infinitely easier for you to then teach that.
Oh,
so
right. Yeah.
I love that. Like that's good. I think, thinking about your department heads and things like that, you want really strong players, ideally, as strong, if not stronger than you in each of the different department head positions. And then the way that we've structured it now, so we have a department head for each of the departments. We have an administrative assistant who helps the department head kind of get some of the admin off their plate. And then you have team members that sit underneath them. And we're finding that kind of works quite well up until about 7 people in each department. And then, we're trying to just think about what happens beyond that, because then the structure doesn't work as well, or you got to start to then have, separate sections, or maybe you break out more departments or add more layers in. But we just want to be careful of that. But it's kind of fun. That's, once you kind of get up to that position, again, you've got good cash flow, and it's much easier to solve problems once you've got cash flow. The hardest bit is always the start.
Yeah, definitely. Which is why we spend so much time teaching sales and marketing. But once a business has their sales and marketing down, I feel like that's even more the perfect time for them to start looking into Systemology. Because like you said, your book isn't for someone who's starting a business. It's for someone who, I've enjoyed, this isn't my first business, but I've enjoyed reading this at the beginning, because now I'm able to build in systems culture from the very beginning, and escape the trap before it pops up. Right. But like you said, I'd imagine most of your clients come to you a little bit later in the journey.
Yeah, it's probably about a week ago or 2. I ran my first little webinar it was Systemology for small teams. And it was because a lot of what I talk about in the book, you're right, it has a certain amount of, traction. And I'm assuming the reader has a small team already. They've been in business for a good number of years. They've got product to market fit. They've already proved that they've got that traction. And now we're talking about adding it in there. But you're right. Really, the whole idea of embedding systems thinking in culture, the more teams that get added, or the more team members that get added in, it gets more and more challenging to change culture. So the best thing to actually do is, if the systems, like if the founder gets bitten by the systems bug, and then they understand the importance of it, and then they find out where their limitations and their strengths are, they can start to build some of this stuff in early. So the webinar that I ran the other week about Systemology for small teams was about the adjustments. And a lot of the adjustments has to do with keeping the documentation as light as possible. The smaller you are, the lighter the documentation might be. And it would be something as simple as what we were talking about earlier, which is just record yourself doing the tasks, load them into these folders and name them appropriately.
Yeah.
But don't do any of the documentation, and wait until you get an administrative assistant who steps in and does the documentation. That's like one of those key distinctions, because if you've run a business before, and you instantly saw it because you've seen other businesses that you've been in and that you've run.
Yeah.
You had the eyes to now go, oh, I can see how applying this right from the get-go. Sometimes there's a little bit of a bit of faith required if someone is a micro team and it's their first business. That means it's hard for them to prioritize systems creation and development, because everybody's attracted to, hey, I'm busy enough as it is, let alone trying to think about systems as well. So it's good you mentioned that, because I'm trying to think about what is the criteria when this systems message will stick. And it can stick for the small team member, assuming they've already got some runs on the board or a previous business so then they can really properly value systems.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess probably too early, there's not even anything to create, right? I mean, isn't there in the beginning, you kind of need to figure out what it is you have to duplicate first?
Yeah. And if you haven't yet got the product to market fit, like if you're a small team, a micro team, and it's your second or third business, and you already know what the operating departments look like, and that function or that department looks good and it's working because I can compare it to the previous business, it's so much easier at that point in time, because really you're replicating what's in your mind already. But if you haven't yet done that and you're a brand new startup and it's just you don't yet have product to market fit. So you can't go too deep down the rabbit hole around documentation and systems, because everything's still changing and moving so much.
Right. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. Actually, one of our clients is watching this, Rich, and he's a systems nerd. He loves systems. And when he started his business, he was building all these systems. And I was like, man, these are so cool. But I have a feeling a lot of this is going to change. So be careful.
Yes. Yeah. And then that's why, and Rich probably would have found it as he started doing it for a little bit. Again, just going back to simplicity. It might just be a video recording and a very small checklist. You just got to be very careful of over engineering something that's going to get just completely redone.
Sure, definitely. Yeah, I think well, you brought up a good point about how, I mean, honestly, one of my favorite parts of reading your book was when you said you guys don't have to, the business owner does not have to build the systems. I was like, thank God.
Yes.
But you have to be involved in it.
It's the dirty little secret of Systemology is I don't actually like writing systems and processes. I'm not the guy who enjoys writing out step-by-step bullet points and all the rest of it. So we perfected a way where I'll meet with the team members and we do what we call an overview system first, and I'll meet with them and I'll just talk them through what needs to be done. That becomes version number one. Typically speaking, what happens is they then take that video and then they come back to me a week later of here are the high level bullet points of what needs to be done. And then we might even have another crack at it, or, I'll talk through in. So we've just gone through this process. I had a call earlier today with the delivery of one of our products, our concierge service, and that was exactly how we developed it. So the business owner oftentimes is the worst person to be creating the systems and the processes.
Yeah.
From the documentation point of view, it's not a very good ROI on the time. There's plenty of other things that only the business owner can do. And really, the business owner should only work on tasks only they can do, and everything else should be delegated out.
Yeah, it's pretty much the main challenge I find with running a business is what do I focus on? What do I prioritize? But yeah, actually, that was pretty much the main last point I wanted to. I think we have a question from the guest, so we can get to that before we hop off. But that was the last thing I wanted to really point out, was that the business owner doesn't have to create the systems. And using my business as an example, we just hired an executive assistant and he's familiar building SOPs processes. So I was thinking of having him be the champion to work with me and the department heads.
Yes.
The challenge for us though is how do we incorporate project management? How and when do we incorporate that, and who's responsible for that? Because we just went from 2 people to 8 people. Everything's on Slack. I know it's not the best place to keep everything. So how could I, or someone even watching this, think about where does project management fit into the picture, and should the systems champion be managing that? Or any thoughts on that?
Yes, definitely. You, as you start to move to, it's when I'll say in the book that managing projects through emails is rubbish. I'd almost say, Slack is the next step up. We use Slack, but Slack is for internal communication, not for managing projects. So what you want is a central location that any team member can get together, whether you're there or not, or any other team member, and see where a client's project or tasks or whatever is up to. So if you're, following the critical client flow we looked at earlier, and there was a part of onboarding, maybe at the onboarding part is the part when that client gets set up in an Asana or Monday or Trello or whatever it is, a project management platform, and you'll have the checklist of what needs to be complete. Yeah. And then maybe the first 3 months, you have all of the key milestones that happen inside that project management. And then that way, those little tasks get complete. And then as you grow, you'll end up assigning effectively maybe an account manager or someone who oversees that client. They might not do all of the subtasks, but they oversee and make sure it's all executed on, and they might assign out subtasks, maybe a subtask to issue out an invoice, or, send the client a graduation t-shirt, or I don't know, whatever it ends up being, those subtasks. So, and it's good. You're right. I spotted a couple of chat questions, so we can jump into those. I know Zane mentioned a good little one around running a travel concierge agency, and mentioning about how do you handle basically unpredictable things. And if you're doing bespoke bookings and tailoring itineraries and things like that. So the way to think of it is, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with video production company earlier, there is a bunch of admin and things that happen around the creative bespokeness, and systemize all of that. So I'm assuming the way that the call comes in and the way that you determine, oh yes, let's line you up with a travel consultant. Let's book you in for a call. Great. Then when you get on a call, there's probably high level, some things that the travel agent, or like the agent, goes through. They would be saying, where do you want to go? What things do you like? What do you like? There's a whole process there to get to know the client before they go off and then make some recommendations. And when they make recommendations, maybe they're making, here are 3 suggested itineraries. Right. And what are the considerations that someone might go through to create those 3 things? So we're not assuming that we are hiring 15-year-old kids off the street who don't know anything about travel bookings. Let's assume that you're hiring, great team members who know a little bit about travel. So we don't need to tell them how to suck eggs. And we can just give them some frameworks. That's one way to think of it. The other way, if you're still having challenges, if that doesn't give you an insight, sometimes what we do is we say, design the critical client flow around a primary target audience with a very specific product. And then every variation outside of that might go to a senior team member. So you might do the critical client flow and design it for European vacations. And I know you design all of these other vacations and whatever. Maybe you just systemize this, and then anytime that target audience matches with that specific location, you've got a well thought out process. Anytime that it doesn't fall inside that, then maybe it goes to a more senior team member. And that's just a good way to start. I'll have a little bit of a look. I can see here, Janelle had a question as well around some tools. We have our own tool, but just start off with Google Drive or Dropbox and just do Word documents. That's a great, if it's just you getting started. And then beyond that, we have a platform called System Hub. That's worth exploring.
Definitely is.
There are, plenty of different places to start.
I think go ahead.
I was just going to say in the tail end, and I'll let you kind of wrap up from here. I don't know, AJ, if you had any other questions that we might cover just in the tail end.
Someone messaged me personally, so it didn't show up in the chat, but they said, how do I build sales? How do I think about sales systems for a web design agency? I think he's gone now, but I think he was just asking, like, what are the basic things? I mean, to me, it's it's attention and lead generation, and then lead conversion. Yep. So start by thinking about those 2.
And it's the critical client flow. It's those first couple of steps.
Right.
How do you grab the attention of the target audience? How do you handle the incoming inquiry? Is there some form of qualification before you hop on the phone? Or when you hop on the phone with them, have you got some qualification calls? Then how do you move them into some sort of sales consultative type process? Maybe you give them a proposal, or however you want to handle that. Sometimes just finding there are plenty of different sales approaches. The whole systemology idea is just capture what you're currently doing, assuming you're already selling people and your process is already working, even if it's average. Just getting everybody up to the best standard that you've got gets tremendous wins. What happens in small businesses, everybody's all over the place. And just getting consistency for a lot of businesses gets them tremendous wins.
Yeah, consistency for sure. It's not always the big shiny home run guys that we need. It's not always the new idea, the new thing. It's just consistency in what we're already doing. I think that was it for the questions. The note that I would like to leave on is, because I know sometimes systems for some people might seem like a bland topic, but what's exciting to me about systems is the freedom that it creates. That's what motivates me, is for me to, I'm living out here in Vietnam, Southeast Asia, but for the last 2 years, I've barely traveled, right? I've been like, see, it doesn't look like I'm in Vietnam. I have this boring white background behind me. But I'm really looking to take because of systems, I'll be able to take a lot of next year with my wife, exploring around Asia and Europe. But for you, just the question I had is thinking back to before you started your business, but before you systemized Melbourne SEO, and you heard you were having a baby and you were working 60, 70 hours a week, trying to find a way to not do that. Going forward, when you actually systemized it all and hired a CEO, like, how did that feel? Like, just going through that journey, but afterwards.
Yeah, it felt great because I took some time out when we had the young kids, and now like I'll ride Nate to school, and usually towards the end of the day, we'll kind of spend a little bit of time. Don't get me wrong, I still work really, really hard. I think, it's the classic thing, even like the 4-hour work week, when we think of Tim Ferriss's stuff. Tim Ferriss, even though he teaches the 4-hour work week, I know some people who know him personally, and he works incredibly hard and long. It's a mindset thing, and thinking about how and where you apply your attention and putting it on the highest value stuff. So Systemology will free you up, and then how you spend that time is up to you. Some people might take the time off, do some traveling. Some people might double down and grow their business and work just the same. But what I want to give someone is at least the option. Most business owners, they don't have the option other than to work 60, 70-hour weeks. There was a period there when I was in it that even if I wanted to take the time off, I couldn't, because everything was so dependent on me, the clients, the team members, everything just would have imploded. Whereas now, I have the ability to kind of at least make the choice. And I'm finding it really fun with Systemology at the moment. Systemology is a startup again. So we built Melbourne SEO up to a certain size, and I stepped out of the operations. Now we're a small team of 15 again, and I am involved and overseeing and architecting. And it's just kind of like this, almost like a rite of passage that you go through to grow the business. And there'll be a point where I step out of the operations, and then things, we've just about 6 months ago, we hired an operations manager, and I'm getting her kind of trained up to come in behind me. So then I can, step out and then focus more on only the things I can do. Like, only I can be interviewed by AJ. Only I can go out and speak at events. And like, I'm great doing those things, but not necessarily in behind doing the deliverable for the client.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's funny how you said you don't really like creating the nitty-gritty systems. And funny for me too, I have a sales training company, but I have a sales team. I don't do it myself. But like you said, it shows that you can rise above it. But hey man, this was amazing. I think the viewers got awesome value. Some people just bought your book, so I'm glad this was profitable for you. But guys, check out Systemology. It's there's a lot of books out there that will give you maybe a 5%, 10% improvement. This is one of those books that can really transform things for some of you. So definitely check out systemology.com. Dave has a bunch of free resources, a software for system management, but definitely the book. So Dave, thanks again for sharing your wisdom, and had a lot of fun, man. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us. And definitely, if you're an audio listener as well, Audible or Amazon, they're great places to start, or just head over to systemology.com. And great to be on the show, AJ.
Sounds like a plan. All right, well, I'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.